Okay, thanks. Nolan Cowden will not be here unless he was able to join. Dale Cook. Steve Densky. Steve Georgie.
I'm here.
You see Mark Johnson.
Yep, good morning.
Morning, Mark. Bernadine Jocelyn. Brian Crambier.
Good morning.
Morning, Brian. Micah Myers. Teresa Sunday. I'm here. Thanks, Teresa. Jim Wakeham.
Morning.
Morning, Jim. Paul Wirtz.
Morning.
Morning, Paul. Dave Wolf.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, Dave. Did Dale join? Steve Densky. Bernadine. Micah. Just a reminder to have your microphone on mute. All right.
Okay. Should we go ahead and get started? All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the October Governor's Task Force meeting. We'll go ahead and get started with the meeting. Before we kind of get into the agenda for today, first thing is Diane has sent out the minutes from our last meeting, as well as the agenda for today. Any questions on the, or comments or concerns on the minutes from the previous meeting? Okay. Not hearing anything, we'll mark those as approved, and we'll get them posted. Next meeting is next item is really on the agenda. What we'll do is
it's so disappointing. Again, talked to the commissioner about this, and he said, "Okay."
All right. Okay. There we go. As far as the agenda is concerned for today, a fairly packed agenda. First thing is we will get an update as usual from the Office of Broadband Development. I believe Diane will be doing that. I think Angie is on the road today. Then from that, we'll have a presentation from 10:15 to about 10:45 on the importance of broadband to agriculture. So Mike Johnson will be joining us from Trailside Hostings to be able to talk about how he's using broadband or needs broadband on his operation. So that'll be an interesting update, and I think there'll be a lot of insight there. From 10:45 to 11 or so, again, we'll be fluid with the agenda. I believe Diane will provide us a little bit of an update on the Treasury guidance for capital projects funding, and I expect there to be some discussion here as well, as far as, what are thoughts, kind of where are things, and I think we'll have some fairly robust discussion once we get that update. Then from that, we will get into the subgroup updates, and it'll be about 20 minutes per subgroup. So the first one will be on mapping and speed goals. So the idea here is, I know you've met as subgroups and you've had some discussions. We're surfacing up some of the preliminary recommendations or items for recommendation that we can have a discussion on. So we'll probably have 10 minutes of an update from the lead from that subgroup, and then maybe 10 minutes of discussion. We'll try to find a break after the first subgroup update in there. We'll kind of see how time goes. Then after we come back from our break, we will do the updates from the other two subgroups on accessibility, affordability, and education, as well as the unserved and underserved funding piece of it. And then we will really wrap up with next steps for the subgroups as we're getting closer to the end of the year and getting closer to that sort of the last two meetings of the year. And then close out with any public comments or other business that those on the task force or others that are present today on the call may want to bring up to the overall group. So any questions, concerns, comments on topics that we covered today? Okay. All right, so with that, Diane, I'll turn it over to you for just a quick update on the Office of Broadband Development and what's going on in your area.
Sure, and I would just note that Bernadine Jocelyn and Steve Fensky have joined the meeting. Real quick, we did have the RFP published. The notice was in the state register, and there's a link to our website for the mapping collection. And I think it's posting for 5 Mondays, and the responses are due October 27th. And we hope to make a decision by the end of November. The other thing is we have approval to fill 2 positions. One is, as you know, Sonia left our office, so we're filling that position, and another position. They will be telework positions, so they could be located somewhere in Minnesota. This is different from the article I saw about remote workers, because these are teleworkers and there's a difference. Otherwise, we have been going through the Treasury guidance. We did send a bunch of questions to Treasury. We got some answers back. I'll cover that a little bit in the PowerPoint or the presentation on the guidance. Angie's been doing a couple of conferences. She spoke at the MTA last week. I'm speaking to the Cable Association Thursday morning. We've been participating in the regional convenings that Blandon has been helping to organize in the regions around the state. The last one is tomorrow afternoon, and then there'll be a roll-up discussion of how to include those, the results from those convenings in the Blandon conference, which is October 12th, 13th, and 14th. I think that's about it right now.
Thanks, Diane. Any questions from the task force members to Diane, or any updates from the Office of Broadband? Again, to just ask a question or make a comment, you can raise the hand feature in Teams, or if you can't find that, just come off mute. Okay. No questions there, so looks like we're moving right ahead. I do see Mike Johnson, you're on. Are you okay to go a little bit ahead of schedule, or do you need a few minutes?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay. All right, so Mike, I'll turn it over to you, and really I'm excited to kind of hear your presentation on why you think broadband is important to agriculture, and obviously you have some personal insights to share there. So with that, we welcome you to the task force meeting and turn it over to you for some remarks.
Okay, all right. Thank you, and thank you to the task force for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit about how we are utilizing broadband internet on our farm and a modern dairy farm, and kind of specifically why it's important to our daily operation. So I believe you have a slideshow with a few pictures. You guys can see that.
And I'm trying to get it up.
I'll bring it up in a second.
Maybe. Man.
As we're waiting, I'll just kind of start with a little introduction. So we're located in Fountain, Minnesota, which is far southeast part of the state. We're about 40 minutes southeast of Rochester, right on Highway 52 if you're headed to Iowa. And our farm was established in 1978 when my dad moved to our area and began farming there, and I officially joined our operation full-time 11 years ago when I finished a business degree at University of Wisconsin, River Falls, and decided to pursue a career in agriculture and join the family business. We currently sell our milk through a cooperative based out of Wisconsin that is called Foremost Farms. There we go. I got a picture. So there's an aerial of our farm last fall as we were harvesting our corn silage that we have just wrapped up this year. And you can go to the next slide, Diane. As I was saying, 1978, and currently we sell or provide about a little more than 6,000 gallons to Quitrip in La Crosse, Wisconsin every day. So if you ever buy any milk at Quitrip, there's about a 10% chance that milk actually was originated at our farm, and they do a really good job, and it's a very well-run operation there, and so it is fresh milk from the leaves our farm within 1 day or within 48 hours, it is on the shelf there, and it's good quality fresh milk. In 2014, we switched to Bluff Country Wireless, which is a local internet that was wireless internet, and began using that for our internet access, and has been a very good partnership and a good relationship with them. It's good high quality speed internet and good service, and we've had a really good working relationship with them. A little over a year ago, we began having internet at 2 different sites, where we milk at one site, and then we have a lot of our young stock that are not milking yet on another site. And so we use a couple management systems on both sites, and with having a solid internet connection at both sites, we were able to communicate live between the 2 sites. So when somebody enters information at one site, it's automatically in the computer at the other site. So there's works for good efficiency and communication between the 2. And I'm going to go on and talk a little more about some of the key management systems that we use, but there's a lot of them. And as I was preparing for this, it kind of really made me think about how much I use the internet every day to manage our business and to manage our animals and our cropping enterprise, and how vital it is to us. So I will speak a little on that and go through a few of them details. You can go to the next slide, Dan. This is a picture of my family. We recently had our 5th child, so I'm pretty excited about that. And I've got 3 kids that are in school now. And so with before I get into the specifics of our farm, just a little more high-end importance of internet to our family in a rural area. Our kids, as everybody was at distance last year learning, and so our kids were able to use their iPads that the school sent home to still do their schoolwork because we had a reliable internet. And with having our baby, we're about an hour from the hospital, so we did a lot virtual and using the portal to communicate with our hospital staff there. So it was very important for that for us. So as I'll kind of an overbroad spectrum over theme too, as a young producer and having using technology and internet being a vital part of that, it allows me the flexibility to not be on the farm all the time and spend more time with my family. As you know, a 24/7 business and an agriculture where animals are demanding, need to be cared for all the time, having utilizing some of the technology I will talk about allows me the opportunities to be with my kids more, travel, and just live a more have a little more freedom, I guess, to make my own choices on time management. So, you can go to the next slide, Dan. So one of the first, probably most important uses of our internet for my daily operation is a cow monitoring system that is called Cow Manager. And this is a picture here of my daughter, Clara, checking the computer with me. And if you see the antenna there on the table on the right side, that is the coordinator, we call it. And so every single one of our animals has an ear tag in her ear. And one of those tags is actually on the table, one of the orange pieces. So that tag monitors that animal and is connected to that and is sending signal to that coordinator 24/7 and is telling me when that animal is walking, when they're running, when they're eating, when they're chewing their cud, and also ruminating, what an animal, a ruminant does, and it also tells me their temperature. So it's a very amazing technology, and we have been utilizing it for a little over 6 years. A very important part of that, though, is having good internet. When we first began using the system, we were having some issues because our internet was, we were losing signal during the night some reason, and it ended up being just like a Google update thing that we just had to fix. It wasn't anything with our internet connection, but it just showed me the importance of it, because every night when that would cut out, I would lose my ability to do a good job managing the animals. So with this system, I'm allowed to, I start my day almost every day with checking the computer or checking my phone, and that will bring up a list of what animals I need to direct my attention towards. So if a cow is not feeling well, or a heifer, the first thing she's going to do, just like us, is she's going to stop eating or not eat as much. And this will alert me saying, hey, Michael, this cow is deviated from her normal eating pattern. There might be something wrong with her. Maybe you should go look at her. And so with having a lot of animals to care for, utilizing a system like this helps me do a better job and spend my time on the animals that need my attention that day. So it's a really good program that allows me to remotely care for my cows and have somebody watching them 24/7. You can go to the next slide, Diane. This is a picture of a few animals with the ear tags. You can see the orange tags in their ears. And so that just gives you a little more visual. So the way it kind of works is it has a couple sensors on it. It's got a lithium battery and then a couple sensors for temperature. But then just like when you flip your smartphone from side to side and it changes the screen, it's kind of the same technology in the ear tag that allows to pattern the cow's activity and creates a baseline. And she deviates from that baseline is when it can alert me. And it has been a tremendous asset to our operation and has allowed me to be more efficient with caring for our animals and do a better job and have the confidence that every single one of my animals is being monitored every minute of the day. And if something is going wrong with them, if they're not feeling well or anything, that it will notify me well before the cow even realizes something's going on, because if she spikes a fever or if she starts to not eat as much, it's going to alert me and I can go give that cow the attention that she needs. You can go to the next slide. This is a picture of a couple of my two oldest sons, Sawyer and Levi, looking at my phone with me. I'm activating a cow, a new tag onto a new animal using my phone. And it's pretty cool to hear my sons give tours to people or talk to people about our farm, and just the difference of how my dad or my grandpa maybe talked about managing their animals and the way my kids talk about it is just amazing, and how technology is such a big part of that. And when they say, hey, we're going to go check the cows after church or something, or when we get home, they say, look, they go to the computer. They don't go to the barn. And it just amazes me all the time when that happens, because it still is kind of surreal to me that's how I manage, but it's been a really good tool for us. You can go to the next picture. I had my other two kids, so I had to include one picture of now my second youngest. We just had a baby here a month ago, and this is my second youngest, Jacob, in the barn playing with this skid loader, showing the cows the tags that they're going to be using. So it's just a cute picture I didn't include. So you can go to the next slide. Here's a picture. This summer, I had the opportunity to travel the Grand Canyon and hike the Grand Canyon in a day. And it's just a cool picture because before I descended, I was checking the cows and sending it because they lose service when you head down. And so this allowed me to be in touch with management back at the farm, tell them, hey, this cow is maybe ill or this cow is in heat. And just the technology to have that internet on site, to connect those cows' activities, get on the cloud, connect to my phone in Arizona, and I can, in real time, text somebody or message somebody to go give attention to a certain cow. It's just a really cool asset the internet makes for our farm and for a younger generation farmer. It allows me to get away, to see things, do things, but yet still be involved, still do the job that I need to do and do a good job as a dairy farmer. We can go to the next slide. The next management system I was going to talk about is a program called Dairy Comp. So this is more of a cow management software that we use, that I enter all of our cows when they're born. We enter the information if they have a ill event, if they need to be treated, and when they move to a different pen, who their mom is, who their dad is, when they get vaccinated, just all of the, just the accounting kind of, if you will, stuff on the animals. So this stuff we enter into the computer, and then from there it goes to the cloud. And this is a screenshot of my phone, of the program I use on the phone, that I can look up any cow anytime when I'm out in the barn, and it'll tell me, when that cow when she had her last baby, when she was born. If I need to look up any hardware or data stuff on the animal, this program allows me to do that. It's just another program that we use. It's very important. It allows me to manage cows, how many days in milk they are. It allows our vet to log in, and he can look up cows. If I have a question, if I'm not there, he can look up without even me knowing it, and check a cow and see, how many days in milk she is, how old she is, if he needs to learn any information. And employees can use this as well to learn about the cows and information when they are in the barns as well. The next program, so that the last one, also having that connection to the internet, also we send a backup to the cloud every day, and so that if anything ever happens, all that data is stored, and so it's not just on my computer, it's not just on a piece of paper, it's stored out in the cloud, so we're able to never lose all that very important information. The next slide here is a newer use that we've had. You can back up actually one slide to the blue Mueller. So this is a newer use of the internet, but we recently did a remodel of our bulk tanks, which is where our milk is stored on farm until the truck comes to pick it up. So this is a screenshot of what I see on my phone, or what I will see when I log in online, and this shows the temperature. So our control boards are hardwired to our computer that then goes out in the cloud, and this allows me to see the temperature of the milk, how much milk is in the tanks, how much milk is going in, the history of the temperature, and I'm also able to set alerts and alarms. So if the temperature of the milk were to increase, or if the wash system was not performing accurately or doing a good job, it would also alert me that it is not washing correctly. And this is very important on our farm, because milk is what we sell, our business, and it's very important to us, and that it's cared for properly. Our tanks are clean, our milk is cooled down efficiently and stays cold, and if our milk does get warm and we have problems with washing and we have to dump, or we cannot sell milk, that is a big detriment to our business. So this is very important, and allows me to do a good job in real time. I can now check it from my home any time of the day and see what the temperature of the milk is in the tanks, and know when the milkman is coming to pick it up, or when they need to be there to pick up milk, and that the tank was washed correctly the day before. The next slide is just a picture of the screen in our milk house right next to the bulk tank, and so that just shows it's a touch screen that the internet is hardwired into, and that just shows the temperature, the volume, and everything on site that is then being transported out into the internet. So the next slide is another program that we use. This is used to how we feed our cows. It is called the Milk Program. It allows us to connect to, we use actually smartphones right now. So it tells us how much to feed each pen of cows, and gives us recipes. All the ingredients are in here, allows us to track inventory in real time. And as we're feeding cows, it updates who's feeding them, how good a job they're doing, how accurate they're staying to the recipes. And our nutritionist, who is located a little over 3 hours away, he can log in at any time and update the rations for our cows and make sure everything is correct. And when we change feedstuffs or ingredients, he can log in and update and change them. Where before we had to print all the papers out and try to deliver them or mail them and then write on them, and it was a lot more cumbersome and less efficient, and mistakes were more prone to happen. This program has also allowed for, I would say, training of new employees and younger employees to use this technology. It's just amazing how we can change the way a recipe for a cow, and within seconds that is changed on the feeder's software, the feeder's phone, and the updates are made, and so no time is lost. Accuracy is no human error is 100%. You can go to the next picture. This is actually my last picture or slide, but this is a picture of my dad using that feed software, using his smartphone. He's 66 years old, and it's telling, as right now, he's unloading the feed, and it'll slowly go down, telling how much he needs to unload for that group of cows. And our nutritionist has logged in previously that day, changed a few things. I could be at home and changed a number of cows or number of animals in a pen, and it will automatically change. And just the use of internet and how important it is to be able to do these things is amazing. And just how things have changed over just the course of my tenure farming, but in the course of my dad's farming. And if you would have told him 20 years ago he'd be using his smartphone to communicate with his animals by seeing if they're sick, or properly feed the animals, or use his smartphone to feed the cows, I think he would find it pretty amazing that we're doing that. And where we're going in the future, I mean, who knows, but I know that for us, farming and doing a good job dairy farming without the internet now, it would be almost impossible. I don't want to say impossible, but it would be very different. And it's such a vital part of our farm and our business and our consultants that we work with. We use a program called TeamViewer that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Probably on a daily basis, to our consultants or nutritionists can log in and do things on our computer and not have to travel and be on site. And we order all of our vaccines and vet supplies all through the internet. I was talking to our veterinarian actually yesterday when he was out doing our weekly vet checks or herd checks, and he said they're all cloud-based for their inventory and billing, and it's just amazing how everything that we do now is internet is just a integral part of our operation. And with that, I guess I'm open to any questions anyone may have. That's just a few details of how we are utilizing internet and how important it is to our dairy farm and to my family.
Thank you, Mike. That was super awesome and a great overview. And for me, I mean, working at Land O'Lakes, it brings it to life for sure, right? So, so there's a question here in the chat from Bernadine. Bernadine, do you want to ask directly, or let me just read it off? Okay, read it. Yeah. So, how typical is your use of broadband depending technology like this among your farmer peers in your region and across Minnesota? Are you typical, or is this bleeding edge adoption? What is the main barrier to other farmers adopting technology like this?
Good question. I would say there's a few things that are a little leading edge, but becoming much more typical. The dairy comp, the cow management software is very standard place. Not all of them, you don't have to have that connected to the cloud, but more and more they are. The cow monitoring system, when we first adopted it 6-7 years ago almost, it was leading edge, but it is becoming much more commonplace among dairy farmers now. There's a lot of farmers utilizing a system like this that needs to have internet to be able to, and a good high quality internet that doesn't go in and out, to utilize a program like this. So yes, I would say a few of them are a little leading edge. The milk monitoring software is very, very new. We're one of the first kind of in our area to implement that, but I believe that too. I mean, food safety and our milk is our business, and so I think that will become more and more adopted as people have the ability or have the option to do so. What was the last part of the question?
It was, what is the main barrier from other farmers adopting technology like this?
Okay. I think of some of it, internet and quality internet connection, and, cost, technology and cost. A lot of, for a younger farmer, I'm in a peer group with some other like-minded young farmers, and we're all utilizing most of these, if not all. And I think as our age as the population ages in farmers, we all know, and trying to encourage people to be in production agriculture is very difficult. And I think when I talk to other younger farmers that aren't utilizing this, like it gets them excited, it keeps them involved. And I think as younger farmers, it's become more involved in management on the farms as we will need in order for production ag to be here. That is, it's going to be a huge asset to encourage those young farmers, but also be, important. As you know, younger generation, they don't want to work on the farm like the older generation did every day, all day, which is, I don't think, a problem. And I think with technology allows us to still be good producers and do a good job, yet allow us the freedom to be with our families and to have time off away from the farm as well.
Thank you for that. Paul Wirtz has a question. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I can tell you, I've been on this task force for a number of years, and this may be one of the first times that we've actually heard from somebody who operates their business from an agricultural rural perspective, not a provider, not a co-op. You're actually contributing as a small business owner and as a key component of Minnesota's economy as a farmer. And as someone who represents AT&T, I really appreciate the multitude of iPhones that I saw in your demonstration there, whether you're on the farm or you're in the Grand Canyon. I won't ask you your provider but so I'm kind of picking up what I saw in the chat there, Steve Georgie and Bernadine. It sounds to me like we have a number of technologies coming into the farm. Can you kind of explain, what your technology, internet infrastructure looks like, and just kind of how that affects your operations?
Yeah, so currently for internet, we are all wireless. Wireless signal from a Harmony, Minnesota. It shoots to actually the top of a water tower in our local town of Preston, Minnesota, and from that water tower, which is also a blue silo, it shoots to our farm. And when we first got that, we had to clear a few trees to get it there. But from there, it goes hardwired into our computer. And then from that main computer, we shoot it in 3 different directions on our main site to pick up signal in a house and then 2 barns. And in one of those barns, it is hardwired into our bulk tanks now to get that data back to the internet to get it out on the cloud.
So that's a fixed wireless solution?
Correct, yep.
Okay, yep. We've heard from providers on that, but so that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
And Mike, there was a question, and you may or may not be aware of this, and Brian may have to help, but what's the upload capacity? What kind of upload capacity do these technologies require? And what they mean by that is, I don't know if you know the type of service you're getting today from download and upload speeds, and then is that sufficient to what you have today for what you need today?
Okay, I do not know the details on our upload and download speed. I know that we have increased it as we have used more data or more technologies, and it is sufficient for us right now, yes.
Okay.
I don't know if Brian would know that, where we're at, but I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't have the exact specifics on what the package that you have, but we have been able to, and I think we've had some presentations on this. Maybe it was Dave Wolf, but with different technologies, we've been able to increase the upload and the download with some newer technologies of the radio. So I'm thinking that we're definitely exceeding the 25.3, and I think we're closer to probably 50 by 10, but right in that area. But I can get back to the committee on that. Good question.
Okay.
I will say that he said those numbers. Now I have one employee whose wife has just transitioned to working from home for Mayo Clinic, and she needed 50/10 in order to be allowed to do that. And we needed to upgrade on that site for the internet, and we were able to go to 50/10.
Okay. Awesome, great insight. How many cows do you manage today, and would that number be lower if you didn't have technology?
Good question. So currently I manage 700 lactating animals and 600 non-lactating, which would be our replacement younger animals that are less than 2 years old generally. And so 7 years ago, when we first looked into adapting this new technology from the Netherlands, that was basically why we were looking into it, because we were getting to a number of animals where I couldn't do a good job anymore at the current. So we were looking at hiring somebody, and we were not having success. And this software this system kind of came on the scene, and it really caught my eye, I guess, kind of because I was initially a big skeptic, because like, how can an ear tag tell me if a cow is sick? So I kind of wanted to try it, and it worked really well, and it allowed me to manage more cows efficiently without the help of more people and do a better job, because the system is watching those cows 24/7, and it doesn't have weekends, and it doesn't have bias of how it's feeling that day. It just tells me the data, and I can go on and look at the data and decide, hey, that cow needs my attention, or that cow doesn't. There's some days I will check the phone before church, and I don't need to go to the farm that morning because there's nobody that needs my attention. And that is an amazing tool to have, that I can just stay home and feel confident that yet all of the cows are being taken care of, all the cows are healthy and doing good that day. So yeah, it's allowed us to manage more animals and do a better job for sure.
That's awesome. Yvonne, I think you had a question. You have it in the chat as well, but.
Hi, Michael. What a cool presentation. I actually saw a farm with robotic milking and a lot of the technology they were using in the Netherlands a few years ago. It looks like most of the data you're uploading is text, numbers and words. Are you also uploading any video or images from any of the programs, any cameras in the barn, that kind of thing?
Good question. We currently are not, other than some videos for social media. But yes, that is a new kind of up and coming way that a few companies are working with monitoring animals. Instead of having the ear tag that would get the data, raw data, they're using cameras to visualize the data and then translate that to how that animal's feeling. So I don't know a lot about those companies, but I do know that it is becoming becoming more common, and it is being utilized, and is something I'm sure in the future that will be, because I'm sure a camera that is actually seeing the animal and what's happening instead of just an ear tag that might not be in the right position on the ear will probably be able to maybe do a better job for us. Good question.
So Michael, I saw you had at least 4 systems to manage the operation: the cow monitoring tool, the cow management or the herd management, tank monitoring, feed rationing, right?
Yep.
To do some row crop farming, and you use technology in that space as well?
Yes, we do row crop farming. We do not use any technology that utilizes. We do use monitors in the planter, in the combine and our harvester that allows us to record yield and moisture and all that, but it is not currently hooked to any internet. I did reach out to some other crop producers recently that there are people utilizing it. So as they're harvesting, it is going live to the cloud, and it is automatically going into their inventory and recording all of that. And then as they feed that grain or that forage out, it takes it out of its inventory in real time. So we are currently not utilizing that, but it is an up and coming way that I'm sure we will be in the future to more efficiently manage our crop and our inventory, because it's our largest expense. And so as we go into the future, we'll have to be more efficient and do a better job with that.
Yeah, and connectivity there becomes even more interesting, right? Because when you're on the barn, you have to make sure connectivity is there. When you're out in the field,
For sure.
Fields are covered, right? Which adds another layer of complexity. But it's exciting.
and definitely in our area of the state where we have bluffs and hills and lots of obstacles to direct line of sight. So,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm not seeing any other questions. I'll ask you one last question. You've already touched on this a little bit, but I saw the picture with being at the Grand Canyon, right, and being able to check on the cows. So, overall, what has the technology done, sort of from a personal standpoint, and specifically a quality of life, right? Spending more time with your kids, and like what, how can you describe that a bit, maybe?
Yeah, kind of what I touched on in the presentation, just the ability to be away from the farm and still do my job, but also the confidence that I can do a good job, yet I think is something that's really important to me, and be at ease and not feel that the pressure that I'm not doing a good job farming just because I'm not on the farm. So it has allowed us to travel, me to be with my kids, to communicate with, if I'm gone, communicate with employees that if something does need to be taken care of, I can communicate with somebody to do that because I'm seeing it on my phone that a cow needs attention. And so, yes, we've utilized it a lot, traveling and being home with family, and just the freedom to not be tied down as much on the farm.
Awesome. Brian, you have a question?
I just wanted to thank Michael for doing the presentation. Outstanding job, and you're an extremely busy man, especially this time of the year. So I just wanted to say thanks. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm not seeing any other questions either. So, Michael, yeah, thank you so much. I'll echo that. Thank you for coming on, taking time out of your day to present this. It means quite a bit to us and gives us some insights into why we even have this task force and the types of things we're trying to do to ensure that, good broadband is available so you can take advantage of technology that you just described. And it's super encouraging and inspiring to see what you're working on. So thank you.
All right, well, I echo thank you, and I appreciate you guys inviting me on and giving me the opportunity. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. Great information there. Great discussion and lots of good questions. So I appreciate the engagement from the task force. So let's transition over to the next topic, which is the overview of Treasury guidance for capital project funding. So with that, I believe Diane or Angie, Diane, we're going to take the lead on this.
Yep, Diane is. I'm trying to share my screen.
Okay.
All right. It's not very. Can you see anything?
Yep, we can see the.
Is it small?
Right. No, presentation's good. Perfect.
Oh, well, I can't see it, but okay. Now I can. So I'm going to talk about the Section 604 Capital Projects Fund, which is the federal funding for the Border-to-Border Grant Program. It is part of the American Rescue Plan Act, which was signed into law in March of 2021. ARPA is also the bill or the law that included the state and local fiscal recovery funding. And state and local fiscal recovery funding nationwide, or actually because it's territories and independent states, was $350 billion, and the state of Minnesota's allocation was $2.8 billion. And then the local fiscal recovery funding that went to the local units of government was on top of that. And I saw in the news that the townships were given an additional week to claim their amount of funding. ARPA also included the funding for the FCC's Emergency Connectivity Fund, and that is the funding that goes to schools and libraries. That was $7.17 billion. The first round of those requests were submitted, and the FCC, I think, issued one round of approval, and the second window is open now. And ARPA included the Capital Projects Fund, and that is described as to carry out critical capital projects directly enabling work, education, and health monitoring, including remote options in response to COVID. Section 604 Capital Projects Fund was $10 billion. Every state was allocated a base amount of $100 million. So states like Rhode Island, for example, got $100 million minimum. And then additional allocations went to the states based on the proportion of the population each state bears to the population of all states, based on the number living in rural areas, and the number of individuals within a state where the household income was below 150% of the poverty line. So Minnesota's allocation then went up to the $180 million. And I would note that tribal governments also have an allocation out of that $10 billion capital projects fund. And I'm going to talk about some timelines later on. And the timelines for the tribal government's allocation and for filing for their funding and dispersing it are different than the state funding. So those timelines I'm going to talk about later don't apply to the tribal government funding that they directly receive. So how can a state spend their capital projects fund? So there were some identified presumptively eligible projects that were in the Treasury guidance that was issued on September 20th. First of all, our broadband infrastructure projects. And under this category, the infrastructure has to be designed to reliably deliver 100 megabits symmetrical, unless that is impractical due to geography, topography, or excessive cost. Then any infrastructure paid for with this funding has to deliver 100 by 20. The projects must be affordable to the target market. You must report your pricing data, and the provider must participate in the federal low-income subsidy program. Right now, that's EBB, Treasury, the emergency broadband benefit that the FCC is administering. Treasury will identify any subsequent subsidy programs that a subrecipient would have to participate in to receive this funding. The recipients must comply with National Defense Authorization Act. They must explain why the communities identified to be served have a critical need. And here this sort of addresses somewhat the RDOF issue, and I'll read it because this is a quote. If considering deploying to locations where there are existing enforceable federal or state funding commitments for reliable wireline service at speeds of at least 100 by 20, you have to ensure that the capital project's funding will not be used for costs that will be reimbursed by the other federal or state funding streams, and must ensure there is additional public benefit and a justification for using additional public funding to deploy to these locations. All right, going back to the presumptively eligible projects, the second category of projects that are allowed are digital connectivity technology projects, and that's for the purchase and or installation of devices and equipment to facilitate broadband access, and where affordability has been identified as a barrier. Permitted devices and equipment that can be purchased are laptops, tablets, desktop personal computers, and they have to be distributed to members of the public through a short or long-term loan program, or equipment for making broadband service available for use in public facilities, and that would include equipment like access points, routers, and repeaters. The ownership of the equipment has to be maintained by the recipient, which in our case would be the state of Minnesota, or a subrecipient. So this program cannot be used to give households equipment. You can loan households equipment, but you can't give it to them. And you also have to explain why communities to be served have a critical need. The third category of a presumptively eligible projects are multi-purpose community facilities, and these are projects to construct or improve buildings that are designed to jointly and directly enable work, education, and health monitoring. And this would include full-service community schools, projects to construct or improve libraries, or community health centers. And you also have to explain why the communities served have a critical need, and there has to be a requirement that the capital project funded will provide services or activities for at least 5 years. And then there is a fourth bucket, and that is a case-by-case review. In case the recipient has an idea for a project, they can propose that to Treasury for Treasury's approval, and it has to be designed to directly enable work, education, and health. It has to address a critical need that results from or was made apparent by COVID, and it has to address a critical need in the community. And Treasury's guidance identified ineligible projects right off the bat, and those are general infrastructure projects such as highways, bridges, transit systems, and ports, and general construction and improvement of hospitals and traditional schools. So now we know how much money Minnesota has and how it can be spent. So what is the process to get the money? So it appears to be a three-step process from reading the guidance. So first of all, a recipient has to submit an application to Treasury that would include the amount of the capital projects fund grant funding that they wish to receive, not to exceed the allocation amount. I'm not sure why anyone would not ask for their full amount, but you don't have to. You have to specify the amount that's going to be used for administering the projects, and that is not to exceed 5% of the total. There has to be a designation letter signed by the chief executive, which would be the governor of a state, that identifies and delegates who is the authorized rep, and then the authorized rep can have identified points of contact. And then you have to have your eligibility and payment information, like your bank account and your DUNS number. And these applications have to be submitted through the portal that Treasury has set up by December 27th of 2021. So that's step one. Step two is after your application has been submitted and Treasury has reviewed it and asked for any follow-up information, they will validate it and issue a grant agreement which the recipient has to sign. And when I say recipient, in our case that's the state, and then the sub-recipient would be any entities that the state has then awarded some of the funding to do a project. So upon execution of this grant agreement, the recipient will have access to the administrative funds. And funds can go to pay back expenses back to March of 2021. All right, so then the third step is the grant plan and program plan. So the recipient submits, after it has its agreement in place, the recipient can submit a grant plan for deploying a capital projects fund grant funding, and then you submit a program plan with your grant plan. And those have to be submitted no later than September 24th of 2022. And the grant plan will include an executive summary, an allocation table, which will show the broad categories of capital projects, those 4 buckets or 3 buckets of how much of your funding you intend to expend in each. Treasury will then review the grant plan for completeness and consistency, and each program plan, or the program plan if you just have one, and separately, so the grant plan will be approved, and then the program plan or plans are separately approved, and once each program plan is approved, they'll provide you access to the funds. And you may submit updates to your grant plans until September 24th, 2022, subject to Treasury review and approval. So you can move money around in those buckets after you initially identify the buckets, is our understanding of the guidance. And then all funds have to be expended by December 31st of 2026. So then how does that tie back to Minnesota's border-to-border appropriation? And I have the language of the law on this slide, which says that the Commissioner of Deed must prepare and submit an application to Treasury requesting that $70 million of Minnesota's capital projects fund that was awarded to the state be used for border-to-border. And, not knowing when this state law was passed, we didn't know anything about when the guidance would come up. So there are some dates in here. No one is seeing slides advance?
Oh, yes. I thought you were just speaking to it. I didn't realize there was slides. Yeah, this first slide.
It's still the first slide? Okay.
But most of you that are in Teams, you may have the ability to advance the slides yourselves as well. It's kind of a feature now. I don't know if you...
Is it moving now?
I'm moving it on my own, but what slide number are you on, Diane?
I was on 11, but now is it showing?
Yeah, like we have the ability to change it ourselves. So some of you can go to slide 11 on your own, or either that, or you can sync. There's a button right next to this. Okay, so at the bottom of the presentation, at the bottom left, there's pages 11 of 13 or whatnot. So you can change it yourself, but there's a button next to it that says sync to presenter, and then it will sync to what Diane is watching.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was moving.
No worries, no worries. It's another feature that just got introduced that's a little clunky.
Okay, so can you see slide 11 now?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I have to advance it. Okay, I got it. So this is the state statute that was passed in 2021 that says that 70 million is of the Minnesota's capital project fund allocation would go to border to border. And then it also has that we're supposed to use 50% for fiscal year 2022 and 50% for fiscal year 2023, and that the Commissioner of Employment and Economic Development may temporarily modify program standards under our statute 116J.395. That is the statute for the border-to-border grant program and how we administer it. So the Commissioner can temporarily modify those standards to the degree necessary to comply with federal standards. All right, so now. And then we specifically asked Treasury about RDOF. We submitted a number of questions to them. One of them was because of our desire to roll the next round of the grant program out quickly. We asked if if the state could file its application, its grant plan, and a program plan all at once, and they said no. You have to submit your application first and get approval of that first before you can submit a grant plan. One of the other questions we asked was about RDOF auction winner areas. And so we cited to the what the Treasury guidance says, which seems to address the RDOF issue, where there is, well, I'll just read it. To the extent recipients are considering deploying broadband to locations where there are existing enforceable federal or state funding commitments for reliable service of speed, for reliable wireline service at speeds of at least 100 meg download and 20 meg upload, the recipient should ensure that the capital projects fund grant funding will not be used for costs that will be reimbursed by the other federal or state funding streams. That is, capital projects fund grant funding must be used only for complementary purposes. So one of our questions to Treasury was, is a preliminary RDOF award an existing enforceable federal funding commitment, or is the existing enforceable federal funding commitment what occurs after the FCC approves the long form application and authorizes USAC to obligate and disperse the funding to the RDOF awardee? And the response we got back from Treasury, and this is directly from the response: please contact the FCC to determine when RDOF funds become an enforceable federal funding commitment. The recipient should ensure that the capital projects fund grant funding in locations where there is an existing enforceable funding commitment will not be used for costs that will be reimbursed by the other federal or state funding streams, and that they only can be used for complementary purposes. All right. Now I have one more slide left. All right, can you see that? So what's next?
Yes.
Okay, so what would be next? Minnesota would submit an application no later than December 27th for its allocation, and I'm assuming that Minnesota will request its full $180 million application. Treasury will review and approve the application. Minnesota will enter into a grant agreement with Treasury. Once we have that grant agreement executed with Treasury, Minnesota would submit a grant plan and at least one program plan. We would anticipate that the one program plan that for sure would be submitted with the grant plan would include the request for at least $70 million for broadband infrastructure projects. So that first bucket of broadband infrastructure. Treasury then needs to review and approve the grant plan and the program plan. Once we have that approval, then we can open the border-to-border infrastructure grant window. And I think we can open it beforehand because Treasury could make us modify potentially. And these are some of the things that'll still have to play out. And then Minnesota would file any subsequent program plans or updates to the grant plan by September 24th of 2022. And then we would make sure that all funding is expended by December 31st of 2026. So that's the update we have from our read of Treasury's guidance. And it is available online if you want to see it. Treasury has not issued any FAQs yet. I know they're gathering them. They responded to a few verbally on the webinar. Most of those were the ones we submitted, by the way. But I would expect they'll have written responses posted soon.
So there's a couple of questions in the chat, Diane. I'll keep this page up, I think, for a second. So on the FCC question, on the FCC point there, does it say, does this mean that Treasury says it's up to the FCC to decide the RDOF question?
I think we would put the question to the FCC if we get to the point and they still haven't done all of the RDOF long form approvals or denials, and we get to the point where we want to award a grant to someone in an RDOF area, we can say, do you have an enforceable agreement with this entity or not? And if they don't, we could award. And if they do, we would have to see if there were areas to, we'd have to go through the process. And ideally, we'll have some discussion with Treasury, as they review our program plan to get some clarity.
Steve George has a question.
Well, in reality, the 2022 construction season is a wash. Couldn't award any grants from the border-to-border program this year, 21, for the 22 construction season. And doesn't it make sense for the task force to take a very strong position to ask the legislature to modify what they approved? And let's get all of that money available so we can actually do something and catch up to another lost year.
So, Stephen, I know we'll talk about it in the work subgroups as well, but let's, so Diane, one clarification there is, so the portal is open now for submission, right? Whatever.
To submit the application.
Submit the application. So then let's say let's say the state was to submit that at the end of this month. What would be the time? What would the timeline look like?
We have no idea. I don't even know if Treasury knows. I don't know how staffed up they are. We keep hearing of more people at Treasury when we have conversations, but I don't know how long it will take. It seems like the application is pretty much defined items that you need to submit, but I don't know. They've got to do this for every state and territory and free state, so that's 60, 70 entities have to do this.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So to Steve's question, I mean, does it, is it 2022, can there still be funding awarded in 2022 or no?
Based on the examples Treasury gave, they said, well, you could file one program plan to disperse funds, and then you could file another program plan in March for dispersing more funds. I think they anticipate that they'd be acting on these earlier in the year versus later. I mean, and they have to if the portal's only open until September 24th. So it doesn't give you a lot of time to learn from how you might have initially used funding in your first program plan if you can't push it out the door in order to file a subsequent program plan or a modified program plan by September.
Okay. So what's the difference between the December 27th deadline and the September 24th, 2022 deadline?
Oh, It's just December 20, did I have 2 September dates in there?
No. There's a December 27th, 2021. That's in the application for the allocation of the capital projects fund.
Correct, where you have to, how much are you taking? How much do you want for administrative costs? Who is your authorized rep that's going to sign everything? Who are the points of contact? And what is your bank account DUNS number?
Gotcha. Okay. And then what's the September 24th, 2022 date then?
They have a portal. Treasury has opened a portal, and it's closing September 24th. And you have to enter your application into that portal. Once it's approved, you have to enter your grant plan and your program plan through that portal. And you can amend your grant plan, and you can have more than one program plan. So when you file you have your application approved, so you can file a grant plan. That grant plan has to have at least one program plan with it. And then you can file amendments to the grant plan and additional program plans up to September 24th of 2022.
Got it. Okay. Brian, you had a question? Oh, go ahead, Steve. Sorry, you had a follow-up.
And again, I just offering my own take on this, but the reality is, yes, Office of Broadband, State of Minnesota may be ready to submit the request for those capital funds sooner than the deadline, but I can't imagine the federal government's gonna, be quick on their end. And then you have until September to submit a grant plan. So it sounds like, again, even though the legislature has said there's 70 million available, 35 in 2022, we may not have a grant program viable to even put forth. And we didn't have one this year. So we've lost an entire construction season. And then we've got RDOF, the other mystery. Last year, you can't submit a grant if there's an RDOF area designated in your grant application, so resubmit. So we lost multiples of opportunities up here in my country for grant recipients. Now, again, there's some uncertainties there, but at the task force, it seems like at a minimum, we want to go back and try and convince the legislature, take the whole 70 million and put it out there as soon as possible for our state, or we're going to lose 2 summers of construction, unless I'm missing something.
That'll be the topic of discussion for I think the third subgroup will have a discussion on today. So, Brian, you had your hand up, but you put it down. Did you get your question answered, or?
No, I was just going to add a little bit, Teddy. There's discussion right now of a special session to allocate some resources for critical workforce. Would it be an opportunity for us to go in and say, hey, the federal government has allocated $180 million. That would give Diane and Angie an opportunity to bump their number from 70 to 180 million to go through the plan right away, rather than having to submit another plan to kind of these are the dollars, let's get them allocated to us for voter broadband grant. And I don't know if that's even possible. I just throw that out there as a suggestion or an idea.
Yep, good suggestion, and that's, again, subgroup, that's exactly the discussion we need to have there. Bernadine?
Thanks. I had a follow-up question, Diane, about the RDOF stuff. So, Diane, does that mean that it'll be up to the Office of Broadband Development to give guidance to communities that Steve referred to that were unable to apply because of the RDOF award, and say that you apply, so that, am I understanding that, okay, if you had an RDOF encumbered project under this new circumstances with FCC deciding whether they have an enforceable contract, that, okay, communities apply, go ahead, apply, and then we, the Office of Broadband Development, will ask the FCC whether that incumbent or that awardee from RDOF is a prohibition for the award or not? Are you guys gonna have to go out to communities and say, the RDOF apply anyway, and then we'll kick it up to FCC and see what they say? Is that the path you see?
Bernadine, yes, and obviously, a few months will pass before we even get to the point of being able to open the grant round. Probably, we might have some more clarity. I would think there's quite a bit of pressure on the FCC, and I know the FCC, USDA, and NTIA are meeting weekly, talking about where they're at, so that federal funds don't overlap and fund the same areas. So there is some pressure on the FCC to get these done. I mean, obviously, I think we'll see the easier application long forms approved first, which probably means the one we have a big question about might be later in the process. But hopefully there's more clarity by the time we even get to the grant round. But yes, if I were a community sitting with some RDOF areas where an auction winner had been announced, I'd be looking at alternatives and, hoping for some clarity and the possibility that the funding could be used there.
Paul, I think you had your hand up real quick, and then I'll go to Angie.
Yeah, I put that in the chat. I mean, realistically, there is no money. It's either the federal money or zero. I mean, the legislature and the governor kind of knew in the discussions of the budget that, let's just line item the federal funds coming to Minnesota, $70 million for broadband. So the only action we have is really to encourage the legislature next year to try to appropriate money, as part of the, if there is a forecasted surplus. I mean, it's not a 2-year budget year. It's a bonding year, and that's it. I mean, there's not going to be money in this discussion in a special session that they have been negotiating months for, frontline workers during COVID, and I just don't think we would have any traction in that debate at this point.
No, I agree with you, Paul. I think that's the path. The key is how do we accelerate the allocation of the federal funding, right? How do we quickly go and submit the application even before that December 27th date?
Yeah.
We submit a grant plan. Can we do it sooner than September 24th, 2022, right? And is it for the 70 million? Is it more than that? Those are the things. You're right. That the key is there's a path here. It's just how do we quickly take advantage of the path that's open. Angie?
Thank you, Teddy. I just add on to Diane's comments regarding RDOF. So our intent would be to submit a program plan that mirrors border to border as we know it today. And part of our current border to border process is the challenge process. So that's another area where RDOF areas would be looked at differently than our prior grant round. If you remember, in our prior grant round, the preliminary RDOF recipients were in a quiet period. So we weren't able to have the kinds of discussions we would normally have with providers who are challenging applications to our program. So I would anticipate that unless the Treasury has issues with that part of our process, that we would continue to run border to border the way we've run it in the past. And that if an area wasn't considered served as we look at it for our program, that the area would be eligible. And then if a preliminary RDOF recipient wanted to challenge a grant, it would be important for them to do that. Otherwise, again, like Diane said, we would be reaching out to the FCC for better information about the status of their award. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Angie. Okay, so I mean, a lot of good discussion here, and a lot of it is spilling into some of the recommendations we can make, and through our recommendation for this year. So with that, why don't let's do this. It's probably best if we take a break now and then get into it and do the updates from the three groups. So it's 11:15. Let's take a 5-minute break, get back together at 11:20, and then we'll kick off with the first subgroup update on the mapping and speed goals. All right, see you in 5.